you get one of these? One.
Wow.
I'm having a big deal on
I
this one.
hope I didn't.
We're in the intro. Stand by for countdown.
It's quite a long countdown. Must be counting down. 2
We're at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners, and welcome to the Wednesday, February 9th, 2022 Board of County Commissioner meeting. I'm Akeem Ashford, the Director of Communications. Starting February 13th, Sedgwick County Health Department testing location will be open for COVID-19 testing on Sundays from 12 until 5 p.m. That's the 4115 East Harry site. The testing site will be open during the week on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. and Wednesdays 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. The site will now be closed on Fridays. We noticed a lot of testing demand on Mondays, with a drop-off occurring in the latter part of the work week. Adjusting to the schedule to keep open on Sundays adds some needed accessibility for testing over the weekend. This is a quote from Adrian Byrne in a release that actually went out this morning. Sedgwick County Health Department is shutting down its drive-through COVID-19 testing site at 777 East Waterman Street in downtown Wichita. The last day of testing at the drive-through site will be Wednesday, February 9th from 2:30 until 7 p.m. We do want to recognize the National Guard, whose assignment ends on February 9th today, who has supported the site for quite some time. The East Harry site conducts nose swabs, throat swab, and saliva testing for adults and children over 18 months. PCR test results are typically available within 24 hours. The CDC recommends PCR tests to determine whether the quarantine after a known or suspected exposure to COVID-19. PCR tests are not recommended within 90 days of a COVID-19 infection. People with recent COVID-19 infection should seek antigen testing instead. Commissioners, the county will be closed for President's Day in observance of President's Day, Monday, February 21st. We'd also like to let you know about the county BOCC meeting. There will not be a Board of County Commissioners meeting on Wednesday, February 16th. Commissioners will be in Topeka meeting with lawmakers for County Day. All right, Commissioners, taking a look at today's agenda. Under new business, an acknowledgement of a donation made by the Literate Ladies Book Club to the Department of Corrections. A resolution adopting the Wichita-Sedgwick County Food System Master Plan. Deputy CFO Brent Shelton will present the quarterly financial report. and a report of the Boards and Bids and Contracts regular meeting from February 3rd, 2022. With that, Chairman Dennis, I turn the meeting over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akeem. I appreciate it. I want to welcome everyone that's in the audience today, all those that are joining us by KPTS and online. I also want to recognize in our audience is Vice Mayor Becky Tuttle. Thank you very much for being here today. We went for a long time without having invocations, and our staff has been working diligently to bring back invocations, and I do appreciate that. And we do have, we'll be introducing Pastor Bob Beckler here in a moment, but I want to thank him for being here personally. But with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Invocation to be led by Pastor Bob Beckler, Central Community Church. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. And once again, you demonstrated that you are on the throne and in control as the sun shined brightly this morning. Father, I pray for this meeting today, and I pray, Lord God, for your wisdom. I pray for each of the commissioners. I pray for their families. And I pray, Lord God, that they would feel your presence in their lives today. Give them wisdom. Give them the ability to see beyond what they can see with the naked eye, Father, those problems that are in the future, Father, that they can make wise decisions today. And Father, our promise is we will point those to you. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, thank you, Pastor, for being here. I appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Meitzner.
Present.
Commissioner Cruz.
Present.
Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez.
Present.
Chairman Dennis.
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
Thank you. Commissioners, we received one email by our website last night. All of us had a chance to review it. I move that we receive and file those that we received online.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell. Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item. As long as we're on public agenda, we do have two people that are signed up for the public agenda today. I did talk to Mr. Barfield earlier and told him I'd allow him to go first, even though one of my members of my Citizens Advisory Board signed up first. And I also, when I talked to him, he has two new items to discuss today that he says we have not heard before. And so I told him that I would give him a little additional time. So, sir, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, sir.
Please state your name and your name for the record.
James
sir.
Barfield, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning, and I want to address the situation regarding the death of Cedric Lofton. I think I have some new information that I wanted to share, but before I get to that, let me say something. During my comments, I might say something that might make some of you feel a bit uncomfortable. It's not my intention. My intention is to do what James Barfield does best. Like the umpire at a baseball game, I call balls and strikes as I see them. Okay? Now, with that being said, everybody recognizes that we have a very, very serious problem on our hands with our juvenile justice system. I have believed for many years that problems of this magnitude do not start at the bottom of the food chain, but rather they start at the top of the food chain. And I think that any smart businessman will tell you that the problems that we have here are not caused because of bad system, but because of bad management. And that's what I intend to address here today. I have noticed in watching commission meetings on TV, on attending the task force first meeting, and nowhere have I heard anyone talk about the administration of the Department of Corrections. The people at the bottom of the food chain only serve to carry out the policies and procedures that are set forth by the top of the food chain in terms of the administrators. Now, I want to ask you a question that you don't have to answer, but I just want you to think about it. If you got in your car this morning to come to work and your check engine light was on, you would be confronted with two options. You could ignore the problem and it would get worse. Or you could choose to take the car and have it analyzed to find out what was causing that check engine light to come on. And I'm here to tell you today about the check engine light that has come on several times regarding the Department of Corrections, only to be ignored. And that's what has led us to the situation we have today. Now, this problem is not that much different than what you faced and were confronted with in terms of the ComCare situation. We didn't really want to take it seriously until it became a crisis. And the mentality that we have at the Department of Corrections today is that it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. And when it becomes a problem, it is because of one of three things, and I'm going to tell you what you had on display here on September 24th. And by the way, these problems did not begin on September 24th. But what you had on display was bad policy, lack of policy, confined by bad judgment, because you had no policy, there was judgment that had to be referred to. In this case, it turned out to be bad judgment. Now, when you have bad policy, you have bad administration, and you have bad judgment, you cannot expect anything except a bad outcome. Now, we go back to check the engine. I want to tell you, I've got two issues here that I want to bring to your attention. One of them is from a professional, national consulting organization that deals nothing but deal with juvenile justice systems all across the country. And a study was done on the state of Kansas and the Sedgwick County Juvenile Justice System. In October, the report was released, and you can see it here. You see at the top of the page, Unlimited Justice. It's an 80-page report. And it says an assessment of access and quality of juvenile defense counsel in Kansas. Now, one of the things that causes the problem that we have here, and I want to address this because what they do in this report, they give you a list of what I call need to improve instances. And then they also give you recommendations for how to correct these. And I just want to point out a couple of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, just point out a couple of them to you here. I thought I had it right at the top. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Some of the key findings of the assessment include, and this one is in particular of importance, despite the recognized harm and trauma caused by shackling and the nationwide movement toward limiting or eliminating the shackling of youth, Kansas juvenile courts continue to indiscriminately shackle young people, and defenders largely fail to recognize the harm or advocate to unshackle their young clients. Now, in addition to this report, every medical expert with any experience and it has any knowledge of this will tell you that shackling of young juveniles is counterproductive and offers nothing good. What we did, and this was 2020, this report came out, and here we are in late 2021, still utilizing shackling on our young juveniles. Now, this has been brought to the attention of your head of the Department of Corrections, only to be met with, and by me, only to be met with denials, and denials. No, we don't have a problem. Well, I'm going to bring you back to that check engine light. When that check engine light is on, the car is still operative. You can still drive to work, drive to church, drive to school, but if you continue to ignore it, what's going to happen? The problem's going to get worse. And that's exactly what's happened, because we ignored it, because we've got a system of the status quo. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, you know what? I'm reminded of a situation where this same type of a situation occurred back on East 21st Street near Oliver when the Kmart was open, and on the south side of 21st Street there was a disability community. And these people would often walk down or on their electric wheelchairs, either walk or use their wheelchairs to go down to right across the street from the Kmart store and walk dangerously, walk out and cross the street to go to Kmart. There were many complaints that were filed with the city about how dangerous this was. Check engine light. They ignored it. And then all of a sudden one day, guess what happened? One of those people in a wheelchair was hit by one of those moving vehicles and killed. Boom! 60 days we got a crosswalk with signals. Reactive, not proactive. That's what happens here. Now, another aspect of this, I myself discussed with the district attorney, only to be met with denial. No, our system is fine. Everything's working perfect. Well, it turns out it was not working perfect. Now, you put together a task force. And the task force, in my opinion, like I said, I'm going to call them like I see them. The task force is handicapped before it's ever convened. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, they're told you cannot talk to certain people. You cannot talk to employees. You cannot talk to people at JIAC. Well, who can you talk to? These are the people that are supposed to be in the know. Okay, so their hands are tied. Now, the second thing I want to introduce you to is on January the 3rd, downstairs, we had a rally where I spoke about Cedric Lofton and his death. That afternoon, I got a very disturbing letter, and I think I'm going to read it to you, and I think you'll find it disturbing as well. And as I read it, I want you to do two things. I want you to think about how many policy violations are included in this report, and this comes from someone that either is or was on the inside at your Department of Corrections. The other thing I want you to think about is how many similarities there are to this report and Cedric Lofton, okay? Sir, I saw you live on Cedric. I don't know if it means anything, but I thought it may be worth sharing. I worked for the Sedgwick County Department of Corrections, and they use the letters on the adult program side. I am pretty familiar with JDC, JIAC, etc. Probably back last April, my good friend was put into a very scary situation. SCDOC is poorly manned across the board, and they will often take people from the other organizations to fill spots when people do not show up for work or don't have enough staff to cover the shift. In this case, my friend was asked to cover the third shift alone at JIAC. She had never worked in that office before, so she was not sure about protocol or special circumstances. This night, she did an intake on a young black male teen who appeared to be on drugs and or having a mental health crisis. She was unsure how to handle this situation, and we are mandated to contact on-call when we are unsure how to proceed. The on-call supervisor, by policy, must respond within 15 minutes. This occurred at approximately 11 p.m. The on-call did not return her calls until 5 a.m. In the meantime, since the child was not properly placed in a holding cell as required, my friend ended up being alone with this young man who was trying to climb over the top of just a plexiglass partition because he threatened to hurt himself and told her he was going to F her up. In the meantime, she continued to attempt to reach staff members from JDF to come and help. She said she tried over and over to reach them over her radio and telephone, and no one answered her call. The young man totally destroyed the entire office computer and equipment and phones, etc., and the like. She said she dealt with that for 30 minutes before anyone arrived and was eventually able to subdue him. They stem from manning issues. Well, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. There are many problems with SCDOC, and it seems they stem from manning issues. This is just one of the many problems or horrible stories born from JDF. You won't need to dig too long, too far to find them, including the complaints from the correction officers about how the supervisors sit and collect paychecks in the break rooms instead of coming to the floor to help cover areas. In corrections, there are requirements that pods/floors be manned by a certain number of people, and that does not always happen. I guess my point in telling you this is that I want someone, and they put it in capital letters, someone to know that there are some pretty big problems going on, and hopefully you can bring some awareness. If you are able to do a Freedom of Information Act request on that incident report, you will learn a lot. Sorry for being so long-winded. So people, I want you to understand, we have problems and they're bigger than what you believe. Now, the last and final point I want to make is, in my opinion, there's two reasons why these problems, and I would say continuing problems with juveniles and mental health, are being basically ignored and pushed aside. Number one, these people don't vote. Juveniles cannot, by law, vote. A lot of the mental health people choose not to vote. Now, because they don't vote, they're considered the little people. We push them aside. We don't have time for them. We've got bigger fish to fry. You see, we've got big-time wealthy developers out there who are contributing to our campaigns to the tune of $250, $500, $1,000, $1,250, $5,000. Those are the people that we provide the attention and focus to. Well, I want to say one thing to you, and I'll sit down. This is a problem that you guys are going to have to look at through a different set of lens, because the public is now awoke and in tune to what's happening. They now know that they can look at any one of those campaign contributions lists during any election cycle and see the same names from wealthy, rich developers and others that you guys are catering to. And if you think that's not going to be a problem going forward, I've got two words for you. Cindy Claycomb. Any questions?
Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, James, for
Yes.
being here today. I appreciate your words. I appreciate the fact that you came and read that letter to us. I have specifically asked for all incident reports for the past 3 years. We had a conversation about it the other day. I wondered, is there a date attached to the date in which the individual is discussing that incident?
I can tell you it was the same date, January the 3rd, that I spoke at the rally downstairs,
Okay.
which you attended.
Well, the day of the incident.
Well, she said
that-
she says in here about April.
Okay, April of,
April of, I assume she's talking about either
2021?
April of 20 or 21.
okay.
But she says there is if you file a Freedom of Information Act, you can get that information, I'm sure.
Okay. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Barfield.
Sure,
I don't
thank
see
you.
any other questions.
Okay, fine.
Next up is Jan Manlove. Welcome. Please state your name for the record. You'll have 5 minutes.
Okay. Here's a piece of this paper. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jan Manlove, and I'm a member of Chairman David's Citizens Advisory Board. We met on Wednesday, and we had just a short mention about the need for administrative offices to move out of this building to expand the DA's office and courtrooms. And so the option is remodel or build new. And I'm here to talk to you and to urge you to build a new building for the administrative offices for Sedgwick County. I have a brother-in-law who's a fellow in the Kansas State University Department of Agriculture, School of Architecture, and he was his entire life a commercial building architect in Kansas City metro area. So I called him to talk to him about what his ideas were on whether it was cost-effective to remodel versus building. And he had some interesting things to share. He said a government building is not just an office building. It has very specialized needs. It has to work for county workers as well as the general public coming in and doing business with the county. So, and when I think about this, I think about the election office across the street, which I consider that just a dungeon that they work in. I think of that every time I walk in that building. I can't imagine going to work in that office space every day. A new building would be designed to have an efficient and effective use of space and energy, thereby saving taxpayers money in the long run. Technology, security, and flexibility is needed to make the facility usable for the foreseeable future. There are defined needs that a county will need to consider, such as large open meeting room for the taxpayers to come and attend your meetings. Taxpayers also access many departments for the county, and it could be designed to make this a very easy access for citizens to do their business with the county. We know in the past 2 years how employees have had to change the way they do their jobs. A new building would be designed to have the flexibility to deal with the changing flexibility and the changing profile of an office job. By making it easier to work and by having a well-defined building, a well-designed building, retention of county employees could be improved. New construction isn't a splurge. It makes sense for the future of our county. Government will always be with us in some form. We are not a business that's always moving to get tax abatements. So building a new facility that serves the Sedgwick County citizens for the future should be upmost in your mind, not to save a dollar here. So that's my idea today, is that you should abandon the idea of remodeling a downtown building and to move forward with new construction. I know this has been on the table for several years, and because of COVID was put on hold, and we need the county to move forward to make everyone's life a little easier, workers and citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jan. I appreciate you being here. Just to be clear, I did not ask any member of my Citizens Advisory Board to weigh in on this here today, so I appreciate her coming and speaking. Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak this morning, so I move that receive and file the public comments. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
New business. Item A. Acknowledgement of a donation made by the Literate Ladies Book Club to the Department of Corrections.
Good morning.
Welcome. Good morning, Chairman Dennis and Commissioners. I'm Stephen Stonehouse from the Department of Corrections, and we'd like to tell you about a book drive put on by the Literate Ladies and the Adorers of the Blood of Christ local chapter. In December 21, members of the local group Literate Ladies Book Club selected the juvenile detention and juvenile residential facilities to be the focus of a service project. Their members donated books and received additional financial support from the local Sisters of the Adorers of the Blood of Christ to purchase even more books for the facilities. In all, these groups donated 171 books with a value of $675.81. These donated items helped replenish the facility's libraries, and each resident was able to select a book as part of the winter holiday celebrations at JDF and JRF. Representative from the book club and sister is here today to acknowledge their gift to the county, and I recommend that you acknowledge the donation and authorize the chairman to sign a letter of appreciation.
Thanks, Steve. Do any of you all want to speak?
Thank you. We're committed to literacy.
Well, thank you very much to the Literate Ladies Book Club. We sincerely appreciate it, and especially you giving that to our folks in the juvenile area. It is much appreciated. So on behalf of the entire Sedgwick County Commission, thank you very much. And with that, I make a motion that we acknowledge the donation and authorize me to sign a letter of appreciation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, I'm sorry. Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, sir.
Item B, resolution adopting the Wichita-Sedgwick County Food System Master Plan.
Well, good morning, Adrian. I think you're speaking this morning, but I appreciate there are a number of other people that are in the audience today that are instrumental in bringing this to us, and so I want to thank them for all of their efforts also. And I don't see anyone, I don't think from the Farm Bureau is here, but they were also instrumental in putting this plan together. So thank you for each and every one of you. And Adrian, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Commissioners and Board of Health. Adrienne Byrne, Health Director. So yes, 3 of the many key people involved in this work are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge them. They also can ask any questions that I don't know the answer to. So Vice Mayor Becky Tuttle, who'd been involved with this work prior to the work on the 2013 Food Desert Study. Shelley Rich, who's a member of the steering committee, and Health and Wellness Committee Facilitator, and then Rebecca McMahon is on the steering committee and horticulture agent with K-State Research and Extension. And Vice Mayor Becky Tuttle and Shelley Rich worked at the health department years ago, and what a team that was. So I would like to take the opportunity to highlight some of the points in the PowerPoint that you were sent about the master food plan. So first, why do Wichita and Sedgwick County residents need a master food plan? Sedgwick County residents spent just over $1.6 billion on food in 2018. If just 5% of those were purchases of locally grown food, an estimated 80 million would circulate through the county each year. We could grow more of the food we consume here. We currently produce only 0.0008% of the chicken we consume, 4/10 of the eggs we consume, 7/10 of the vegetables, and 2/10 of the fruit we consume. Approximately 25% of Wichitans do not have access to healthy food. Residents have said that they have a strong interest in building a robust local food system in Wichita and Sedgwick County, but the community needs a roadmap to guide the process. The community needs to know where and how to invest time, resources, and partnerships to best support a vibrant local food economy. With the input of over 2,200 residents and many community partners, several potential goals were narrowed to 3 overarching goals. Now, each goal has multiple objectives aligned with the goal and action steps identified to meet the goals and objectives. These 3 were foster food system coordination and education, improve access to healthy food, increase local food production. Now, next steps. If adopted, staff from both Sedgwick County and City of Wichita will work together to create a joint city-county food and farm council that would work to implement the master food plan. I recommend that you adopt the resolution.
Well, thank you, Adrian. We appreciate the update. I know we've all been briefed on the food master plan in the past. In addition, the City of Wichita has already adopted it. We're the next in line for this joint plan. Thanks for all the hard work that went into developing this. Commissioner Lopez and I both represent large areas of rural Sedgwick County, and they're the ones that grow a lot of the food that help us sustain life. So I want to make sure that we also thank the Farm Bureau, who also participated in this. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Adrian, for being here today, and thank you, everybody who joined in this effort. How can, what is the process for appointing the Food and Farm Council?
Let's see, who has Becky or Shelley, do you know the response to that? Or it will be just the city and county recommending? Do you want to address that, Becky?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me be here today. It's my understanding that if you do adopt the plan today, as mentioned, the city has adopted the plan, then staff will coordinate in the Master Food Plan and through the work of the Health and Wellness Coalition and the Food Policy Council. There's been some guidelines of who we think should be appointed, not necessarily names, but positions. And so it's my understanding that after, hopefully, the passage of this today, staff on both sides of Central will coordinate so that we can move forward with adopting the Food and Farm Council or the Food Policy Council, whatever we choose to call it.
How many people will be selected?
I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I think it was around a dozen or so. But it's representing the 3 different areas of the Master Food Plan. So making sure that we have people who are growers, we have people that are consumers, we have people that live in food deserts, we have content experts from the different agencies and organizations who have been involved.
Great. And just one more question. Yeah. So in a lot of the locations around our community, we're seeing Family Dollars and dollar stores pop up. Specifically, in my neighborhood, I notice a lot of folks going to the Family Dollar that's at 13th and Broadway because that's really the closest place they can buy food. Sure. How are we working, or how does this plan, and maybe that's what's going to be discussed, how will this plan work with those national chains like Family Dollars or dollar stores when those are the only locations for neighborhoods to get food? Is that part of the plan?
Sure, absolutely. And we have had the opportunity to work with a consultant who's helped us look at other communities across the nation who have had similar issues of food deserts like we do in Wichita and address some of those issues. I know that, for example, there is one store that's I think it's a Dollar Tree or a Family Dollar that has adopted their own individual choice of having produce, fresh produce and lean protein in their store. And so there's been some opportunities to reach out to them at the regional level to see if they could do that as well. So those would be some of the opportunities for the Food Farm Council or the Food Policy Council, whatever we choose to call it, to address.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Mayor, you may not want to go too far. I have questions you might be able to answer. I shared some of my concerns when this was presented at the en banc meeting we had a while back, and I had some concerns back then. Overall, I'll just tell you up front, I plan to support this today, but I do have some concerns, and I just want to share that with you. Parts of this I think are great. I see some deregulation here, allowing communities to produce food and sell food to people who need food, and to me that's probably why the Farm Bureau supports this. I think, generally speaking, I think that anytime you deregulate and allow supply chain to find more ways to create things that people want, generally speaking, they're going to be on that side of that. And so generally speaking, I think that's certainly good in this policy today. I think education is obviously a positive part of this policy today. I have a couple of concerns, and I'd like to share some of those with you. On page 8 of the document has a nice pictorial. And some of the things on the pictorial, it talks about, for example, and of course we know this is being debated in Topeka right now, eliminates sales tax on food. Generally speaking, I support any tax decreases. I think that's what people want, and I think there's opportunities for us to lean up government. And so, generally speaking, I think that's good policy. But to me, this is not necessarily helping people who are on food programs, because a lot of people get food through distribution centers, they get food through SNAP or WIC and things like that. And those are not taxed programs. Those are not taxed foods already. Is that correct? Can someone answer that?
That is my understanding. I mean, the state of Kansas provides the food vouchers to us that we give to our residents that are eligible for the program.
And so what that means is for those types of programs, or TANF, SNAP, or WIC, those programs I don't believe are paying sales tax on food. And then, I don't know where the state is right now on this, but at least a while back there was a homestead rebate or something. If you're qualified low income, there was some type of rebate you would get on your income tax return from Kansas. It would actually essentially pay you back for what they estimated to be an average cost of sales tax that you would have paid on food. And so I don't know where we are in the state. That policy may have changed. I really don't know where we are on that policy, but that's where we have been in the past. And so there was some consideration for qualified low income to have some relief on paying sales tax on food. And so what the sales tax reduction on food is going to do primarily is going to be for people who are not qualified low income. It's for people who are above that level. So I don't know that necessarily is going to necessarily solve any of the food challenges we might have in a community. It talks about government should incentivize grocery stores to locate in food deserts. I have some concerns about what that means. I don't know what we mean by the word incentivize. Can someone help me with that?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner, and the opportunity to respond. So in the plan, this is a 10-year master plan, and that's one of the options. We understand that this is a fluid document, and it's not necessarily proscriptive. At this point, I know from being across the street at the city, we haven't discussed that, but it's an option, and it's what other communities have done. When we look at food deserts, we're talking about getting people to food and food to people. And we've determined in our community we have 6 root causes of why people are in food deserts. The geography, but also why people don't have access to healthy food. So that's one of the options on the table. But because it is a 10-year plan and it is a fluid document and there will be community engagement and involvement, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to do that. It's just something that other communities have done.
I remember back when I was just getting into the job market, back when I was like 16 years old, long time ago. I remember someone called me on the phone. They said, "We'd like you to deliver a pizza." I worked at Pizza Hut at the time. And I actually laughed on the phone and said, "We don't do that, sir. You'll have to come get the pizza." And I look back at that now and saying, well, obviously the guy was onto something, because you can get delivery of almost anything you can imagine now. So the world has changed, so to speak. And in terms of getting a grocery store to create a footprint in every square mile of the entire community may not be pragmatic. I think that getting food to people may be easier, considering some of the maybe weekly or biweekly delivery options. And so I think that there ought to be programs developed that people can get, they can order food perhaps and have that delivered. And maybe there's, whatever the cost of that is, maybe that's something that can be figured out in some solution to this. But that would be a lot easier in many ways than trying to incentivize someone to actually build a grocery store in some locations. So I would encourage, I don't like the word incentivize, because I think it's undefined. And when we approve a plan like this, the narrative is, well, it was passed unanimously by the city and the county, so everything in this document is being repeated as though it has 100% support by everybody who voted for it. And again, this is one of these documents where I think there's a lot of good in it, and I would like to vote for it and show support for it. I don't agree with everything in here. So I would be very cautious about putting words in, a narrative out there saying there's unanimous support by city and county that everything in this document is essentially our plan, and we're going to do all these things. I would not support that. So we're going to be very careful. And that has happened in the past. One of the other concerns on this page, it says, provide financing for retailers government. Provide financing for retailers to increase coolers and shelf space for local foods. I don't know if we're going to get into the financing of private businesses and what they need. To me, that's a very slippery slope, and we've not done that in the past, I'm aware of. I'm concerned about that on this page. I don't know what that means exactly, but that's concerning to me that that's actually on here. And you're welcome to comment if you like.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. I think, again, anytime that, keep in mind, this is a 10-year master plan, and if anything we learned in the last couple of years, things change, and you have to be fluid. And because of COVID, we are going to have some creative opportunities for addressing food deserts. I agree. I don't think a brick-and-mortar grocery store in every food desert is the solution. I think there are other ways that we can get people to food and food to people. And so keep in mind also that anytime time that there's budget that would be associated with any of the solutions or implementing of the plan, it would come before the county commission and before the city council. And so this isn't just a carte blanche, everything's going to happen in the plan. The Food and Farm Council or the Food Policy Council will make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioner and to the Wichita City Council. So this is just a blueprint. This is a guide based on best practices from model cities who have done work in food deserts.
I appreciate your comments. I just want to be very clear to anybody who's listening who thinks they can come to the government to get support, incentives or financial support, loans or whatever, some type of help from us to provide the equipment they need inside of a grocery store. I just don't think we're not going to go there. So, again, it's on here. Maybe it's a worthy discussion, I suppose, but I'm concerned about that. Again, I like the deregulation, allowing farmers markets and things like that, and neighborhood people, neighborhood food plots. I think that's all fantastic. There's a comment on page 26, we should say on what page is this? Page 16 of the document. It says, consider adding requirements for new retailers wanting to open a neighborhood, i.e. a 10% square footage requirement for fresh food. That I have a problem with as well. I wanted to, I agree fresh food is a fantastic goal, but these stores need to be able to be successful. And if they can't make money with whatever model they've put out there, they're not going to stay in business. So they've got to find a way to stay in business. And this is another regulation where, again, I think it's a great goal, but I don't want to create a regulation that would require that. And
you will have the opportunity, with any recommendations, you will have the opportunity to vote on those.
And I understand that. And again, this is not approving those regulations today, but just the fact that this on here, I want to share a concern. If someone thinks that later on I voted for this and therefore I support this idea, no, I don't. I want to be very clear. Let's see. One other comment, objective 3, consider city county funding for food banks, pantries, and hot meal programs. We do have some support from county right now on Meals on Wheels. Is that we're still doing that? In terms of city county funding for food banks, we have not done that. Is that correct? I don't think we have. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. One of the things that has come from COVID is we do have ARPA funds. I know the city and the county, and during a workshop discussing some of our ARPA funding, I have asked my colleagues to consider using some of our ARPA funds to help address food deserts and potentially implement some of the master food plan. So an example could be at one of our federally qualified health centers now, they have refrigeration for fresh produce and for lean protein so that when their clients come, they're able to get shelf-stable food, but then also healthy food options, perishable food options. And so one of the things that we've done at the city is we have drafted an RFP so that if we do indeed approve our ARPA funds to be utilized to help address food deserts, entities in the community could apply for funding, and that could be one of the options, for example. So I do see that there could potentially be city funds used in this way if we allocate ARPA funds to address food deserts. Again, it's just a blueprint, and this is just something that we're utilizing as a tool, a conversation starter, a plan, understanding that, things in 10 years, in a 10-year plan, things are fluid and may change.
Let me just say, for ARPA funding, I think that anything the county needs to actually deal with COVID recovery, I think that money is very directly applicable. Outside of that, any of the money that might flow to the community, it needs to be for one-time spending, not operations. And so ARPA money should not be used for something that's going to be, for a 10-year, again, this is a 10-year plan, as you've already mentioned a couple times. ARPA funding is going to be gone here before you know it. And so at the end of the day, if it's used for things like a freezer, that's one thing, but for operations, to actually buy food and distribute food, that would not be reasonable, I don't think. Go ahead.
Thank you. One of the recommendations that I have made, and in the request for proposal that we're drafting, if we do indeed decide to utilize ARPA funds for food desert issues, is that it has to be sustainable. It's not for staff. It's not for food. I could not agree more. It's for not for operations, because that's not sustainable. So I completely agree, and that's one of the steps that we will be taking at the city if we allocate ARPA funds.
Thank you for that comment. So notwithstanding the temporary opportunity with using ARPA funds for some of these things, I want to be very clear. I do not support using taxpayer property tax dollars to provide funding for food bank programs. I don't think that's appropriate. People can give to those things, and I certainly encourage that. And I would also say on our Meals on Wheels program, I'm a huge fan on part of it, although I would like to recommend, I've said this for a number of years now, that, again, the world's changed. I think that there ought to be some efficiencies that are considered on ways to make that program more efficient, delivery of maybe more than one day, and using technology to check on people. There's a number of ways to do that, and I think that right now to deliver a single hot meal on a daily basis we all consider our carbon footprint and you know, the impact on the environment, for example, driving around delivering one hot meal. It's just not very. There's reasons why that's not the best model today. I think they need to update the program. Again, I support the program, but I'd like to see them reconsider some ways to make it more efficient and more effective. And I think that again, it's an important program. I support it, but you know, the average cost of a meal is like $8 or $10, and it's a single hot meal. And to me, it's just not. It needs to, I guess it needs to be updated. So with that. Thank you for all the work that you've done, and I expect this will pass today. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here today and briefing us on the latest information that we have on the Food Master Plan that has already been passed by the city. It's a joint plan. We have an awful lot of plans that are joint plans between Wichita and Sedgwick County on the shelf. There are aspects in each and every one of those that may or may not happen in the future. As decisions come before us in the future on what we are going to spend money on and support, we make those decisions one at a time. So I can't say that we always make the best decisions, but we make the best decisions based on the information we have at the time. So again, I thank everyone for being here. I move that we adopt Wichita-Sedgwick County Food Master Plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner,
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Howell,
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez,
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Again, thank you all.
Thank you,
Appreciate you being here. Mr. Clerk, next item, please.
Item C, presentation of the quarterly financial report.
Morning, Brent.
Good morning, Chairman Dennis. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Brent Shelton, your Deputy CFO. For the next few minutes, we'll be looking at the results of the county's fourth quarter financial report for the period ending December 31st, 2021. I would be remiss if I didn't mention at the outset of this that this report is only possible through the efforts of some of the professionals that I work with in the budget and the accounting office, day in and day out, quarter after quarter and year to year. They do the heavy lifting, not only to provide this information, but to manage county finances in a prudent and sustainable manner. One of the things that we've mentioned in giving quarterly reports over the last year is that the timing of the receipt of the federal stimulus dollars has caused some dramatic shifts. We'll see those in the graphs. To the extent possible, we'll remove those so that you can see what things might have looked like had it not been for the receipt of CARES or ARPA dollars. Remember that the information in this report is based on unaudited financial statements. I'm going to stay at a fairly high level today. You've received the document. At the conclusion of this report, when you receive and file, then it will be made available on the county's website. As we typically do when we begin looking at the quarterly financial report, we take a look at the change in fund balance across the 6 operating funds in Sedgwick County. If you go to the far right corner, you'll see that the bottom right corner, you'll see that the ending fund balance across all these funds exceeds $200 million. Let's just go left to right and see how these fund balances have changed from December 31st of 2020 to December 31st of 2021. You'll note a decrease in fund balance in the county's general fund of about $1.9 million. If you recall last year, we deposited about $16.9 million in CARES funds for eligible personnel reimbursement. That increased our fund balance last year. As one-time COVID response type expenditures have been made throughout the year from the general fund, that fund balance has been drawn down. One of the things we'll see throughout the report is that our tax collections are improved year over year, and that increase in taxes is contributing to about a $400,000 increase in the fund balance in the bond and interest fund. Our other property tax supported funds, of which there are 7 outside the general fund, have experienced an increase of about $2.8 million year over year. Not only are property taxes up, but our gasoline taxes have seen an increase, so that's contributing to this fund balance increase in these funds. The other non-property tax supported funds, these are the place where those stimulus dollars are deposited initially, and while we have money in those funds available for ARPA-related expenditures or pandemic-related expenditures, we're seeing an increase in fund balance in those funds year over year of about $7 million. Increased property tax collections and some modest decrease in expenditures are yielding us about $1.5 million increase in fund balance in the fire district. And then in our enterprise and internal revenue funds, we're seeing an increase there that's a very healthy increase as a result of some savings in our self-funded health and dental insurance funds as a result of some rebates for reduced prescription costs as well as some reduced healthcare type claims. So overall, we're seeing an increase of about $16.8 million in fund balance across all of the funds, looking very healthy going forward. To graphically depict the revenues in the county property tax supported funds year over year, what we see is a decrease of about $8 million. Again, this goes back to what we discussed earlier, those deposits that were made, transfers that were made into the general fund last year at the end of the year for those COVID those reimbursements for those eligible personnel expenditures that were related to COVID. As we've, those didn't occur in 2021, so the revenues in those funds declined a bit. But at the same time, the decline in that revenue is not as much as those deposits because of the fact that we've seen improved tax collections in those property tax funds. Expenditures in those funds in 2021 have increased over 2020, primarily as a result of one-time COVID-related expenditures, again, for temporary employment services, part-time temporary positions in the health department for the pandemic response. Were it not for those expenditures, what we would be seeing is a much flatter line between 2020 and 2021. The increase here is basically an increase in the transfer because of higher sales tax receipts that we received in the general fund that were then transferred into bond and interest and our road and bridge fund. To give you a little bit of detail more about the revenues in the property tax supported funds, again, if you look at these line items that pertain to the receipt of taxes, the top 3, property sales and motor vehicle taxes, all showing healthy gains year over year. We've also seen, if you drop further down, our special city-county highway fund, that's our gasoline tax, up about 10% year over year. We're seeing some activity that's in the result of licenses and permits, continued officer fee increases year over year for filing fees in the Register of Deeds office. Paints a picture of increasing activity and increasing property tax revenue collections.
Brent, on that last one, why is it dollar change negative 8.01 when it looks like the positives are more greater than the negatives?
Not every fund is captured in this, or every expense item is captured in this. We just get the top 10.
Okay.
So if you add them up, they won't add up.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
There may be a number of others that are part of that equation.
There must have been a lot of negatives then.
There were some others, yes.
Okay.
Personnel expenditures in these funds. Personnel is our biggest expenditure in these funds. And I would point to the bottom line, a 1.4% increase, which is relatively flat for all the personnel expenditures in the property tax supported funds. One thing that I'm cautiously optimistic about, if you look at workers' compensation premiums, we've seen a bit of a dip or a bending of the curve there. We had fewer serious accidents last year, so this is a good sign. It doesn't mean that it's going to sustain, but we're doing everything we can in that area, so maybe some of the things that we're doing to date are beginning to pay off. Non-personnel expenditures in those same property tax related funds, an increase of about 14%, but if you drop to the bottom line, you'll see where that is coming from, about almost $12 million in temporary employment services that aren't considered personnel expenditures because it's a contractual or temporary type employment a contractual relationship. Shifting for just a moment to the fire district, as mentioned when we looked at their fund balance, they have seen increased receipts in terms of their property tax revenue. A larger tax base results in more property tax collections. It looks flat on this chart. They do have fire service agreements. There were 2 fire service payments in 2020 and there wasn't one in 2019. It was just a timing that inflated 2020. So this line would typically just be a gradual upward trend due to the increase in the tax base. If we look at their next slide, their expenditures, you note that continued downward trend in expenditures. Their cash purchases for vehicles was down last year, year over year, contributing to that roughly $600,000 decrease. And this will show you that in more detail. Increased collections on the top 2 lines from taxes, and then relatively lower expenses in terms of capital outlay and so forth. Now let's look at the non-property tax funds. These are funds that are not supported with a specific property tax levy. This is one of the ones where we see those dramatic swings. The peak in 2020 is a result of receiving that 100% of the CARES funds, the $99.6 million and then the $9.3 million in Sparks funds that we received that year. In 2021, we received half of our $100 million ARPA allocation. A little too far. Without those 2 receipts of those stimulus funds, we're looking at a much more stable picture, not as dramatic a change in those funds. Expenditures in these funds, again, representing in 2020 the expenditures of CARES funds for the different grant programs and COVID-related response that had to occur within that compressed time frame versus expenditures now in 2021 and ongoing with ARPA fund that we do have a little more time, that those would be spread out over 2021 and ensuing years. Without the COVID-related expenditures, you see a much flatter line with this. These decreases that we've seen in 2020 and 2021 over the prior years are just a result of belt tightening, if you will, across the organization. There's not one thing that we can point to other than overall expenditures are declining. So, detail about those top 10 revenues. If you note the top two lines, the $50 million received this year for ARPA, not received last year, and then the CARES funding that was received last year but not in 2021. Going down the rest of the chart, the one that shows a large increase in terms of percentage, a couple $1 million or a 45% change in our federal revenue for state pass-through. This is a bit misleading. It's more of that some federal revenue that's being booked now as federal revenue was state funding. They've shifted it to federal. So it's increasing this line item. It's mostly occurring in the Department on Aging, the Senior Care Act. So it's basically the source of funds has changed, pushing that federal revenue state pass-through number up. Expenditures in these funds, the changes that we've seen year over year. The grant awards, there were a number of grant awards last year using CARES dollars. We haven't done as much in that arena in 2021. Premium pay that occurred this year earlier for county employees that were affected with the pandemic that didn't occur the year before. And then our temporary employment services, again, those are pretty dramatic fluctuations in the expenditures year over year.
So Brent, the negative figures are because of staffing shortages is why that we're spending less?
Yes, if the dollar changes a negative number, that expenditure item went down.
I understand that, but it's because we're having staffing shortages.
Yes. Yes.
They should have been up if we'd had the staffing that we need.
Correct. Yeah, there's significant salary savings in some departments because they haven't been able to fill positions, EMS, ComCare, places of that nature.
And when we're a couple hundred short in ComCare and all the other critical agencies, we're going to show a savings in wages just because we are short on staff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
This chart and the next chart just depict the general fund balances as a result of the property tax collection cycle, receiving those funds in the first 2 quarters of the year and then spending them down throughout the remainder of the year. We show an unrestricted fund balance, the general fund, of about $89 million at the end of the year. This one indicates the unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of our budgeted expenditures. County policy indicates that we will maintain this at or above 20%, and you can see we've historically and consistently stayed above that line. Looking at our investment portfolio, this is not the greatest news to present to you today, but if you look at the last quarter, we saw that for the first time since the last time we were looking at rising interest rate environment, we slipped below our benchmark yield. Our portfolio of about $660 million yielded a return in the last quarter of 0.19%. what we saw was that the benchmark yield went from 0.09 in the third quarter of the year to 0.38. So that benchmark on the Treasury yield quadrupled. We're starting to see those interest rates trending up, but we can't respond to that until things mature and we reinvest those funds. So when things begin to move, we respond, but sometimes those lines will cross.
Commissioner Meitzner has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Brent, on this slide, so every December, the last 5 years, the portfolio balance has been increasing, obviously.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then during the year, it's up and down. I see that.
Right.
So for us to look at this, is that benchmark the end of the year, the actual fund balance to start the new year, I assume?
Yes, that's the fund balance, that's our cash balance.
Cash balance, right.
Right.
Is there a policy on do we have a goal, or is this just a gradual, do we have a policy about this at all?
We do have a policy about it, and by state statute, our investment options are limited. We have to be in things that are government-backed securities, cash equivalents.
Okay.
But our policy, we strive to maintain at or above the benchmark, which is the U.S. Treasury bill rate. So what we've seen is that as things mature, we're starting to see higher yields, but the numbers we didn't quadruple those yields in a 3-month period, but that index did jump.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Looking at, over the course of the year, at some of the significant capital projects that were completed, we replaced 4 county roofs on different county-owned properties across the county. There was the Regional Forensic Science Center. There was some replacement on the roof in this building. A couple of buildings at the county parks saw roof replacements. In addition to that, the adult detention facility and major courthouse space remodel were completed. The remodel was primarily contributed to the money was in the DA's office. Over the same period of time, Public Works reconstructed 7 bridges last year. $3.2 million were spent in that. There were 4 different road projects that were completed, about $2.6 million. We've talked about some of these over the course of the year as they were completed during those quarters. So I guess to sum up, the takeaways that I would leave are that one is that our tax-based growth this year was 4.6%. That's a healthy number for us. Sales and use tax growth was up 12%. Last year was pretty erratic as we saw big swings up and down as a result of the pandemic. We started to see pretty strong growth out of that. I think in 9 of the 12 months, retail sales tax receipts exceeded what they did the year before. Our local real estate market seems to continue to be pretty strong. This interest rate market, we're seeing those continued refinancings and people purchasing real estate. And we've maintained some healthy fund balances going forward that we can draw upon as we do make those responses to the pandemic. As I look in terms of outlook, some things that are on the horizon that we're watching that can have fiscal impact. One is that continued hard insurance market. We are expecting that for the July renewals of our property insurance and some of the other insurances, potentially a 25% increase. That could be $250,000 to $300,000 increase in those property insurance premiums. both internally and across the community. We're seeing workforce challenges. We're dealing with the compensation issues for our employees. We've heard repeatedly as we've talked to the community about the workforce challenges that they are facing. At the same time, we're seeing some economic expansion. We're seeing those increased sales, pushing up those sales taxes. A jobs report nationally for January indicated 467,000 new jobs across the country, and the two leading sectors were hospitality and leisure. So maybe there's some recovery coming in those areas. I think the most optimistic economic forecast for that was 150,000 jobs, so it outpaced what they were expecting. But with more demand for products, with economic expansion and more jobs and supply chain disruptions, we get to the next one, which is inflation. Things are just costing more today than they did yesterday, and that's something that we're watching as well. As the economy continues to expand, we're hearing from the Federal Reserve that they're going to be increasing interest rates. The first one could occur in March. So as we watch these things, that can have a positive fiscal impact as we reinvest idle funds. It can also have a detrimental effect as we look to bond potential capital projects going forward. And the federal stimulus, although it brings us a lot of headaches, it brings us a lot of opportunities, that not only things that we can do internally or apply for, but we have community partners that we're working with. So a win for Wichita State on a grant or a win for the city is also a win for us. So we're working with them so that we can coordinate efforts in trying to attempt to obtain those federal stimulus dollars. With that, I will attempt to answer any questions that you have, and conclusion of that, I would request that you receive and file the report.
Well, thank you, Brent. Very nice summary of this big book that you all provide to us. It's also very timely because next week we're going to start our budget cycle with some briefings. So making sure that we know where we're at right now will help us as we start forecasting to the future. Well, thank you, Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am curious, can we go back a few more years on the sales tax and sales and use tax numbers? Because that 12% increase seems to be unbelievable, actually. I mean, it's just, I believe this report, but so from one year to the next, it's 12%. But I don't know if that means we're 12% above our historical revenues.
If we go back, I can kind of remember 1 year.
Yeah.
We saw a very modest increase from 2019 to 2020, and it was around 2%, if I remember. So we were anticipating a big drop in 2020, and we did for some months, but then it seemed to catch up. But I can provide you with 5 years historical on that.
I think we should take a look at that. And when you talk about motor vehicle taxes, again, is that fuel taxes or is that property taxes also?
The fuel tax is in the special highway.
Okay.
That's the special highway fund. The motor vehicle taxes are the fees and taxes that are collected at the tag office. Those annual motor vehicle taxes and
Are those tax rates set by county, or are those tax rates set by the Department of Revenue?
They're set by the Department of Revenue based on the county's average county mill levy that's 2 years old. It's a complicated formula, but we take an average mill levy for the county, in this case for 2020, and moving into 2022, that average county mill levy is applied to someone that's renewing their tags at the tag office. So you're in Derby and I'm in Wichita, we're going to pay the same rate on our vehicle, and then the distribution gets based on those rates.
When you use the word average, is it average amongst counties or average amongst municipalities? We're averaging what's being averaged?
It's the average mill levy of all the tax jurisdictions within Sedgwick County.
Including schools?
Yes.
Really? Okay. Officers' fees, what is that again?
Those are fees that are paid for filing documents in the Register of Deeds office. So it's a per-page filing fee, and those, go ahead.
You know, again, I'm kind of missing that report. We used to get a report on the change in legislation that moved it to a per-page filing, per-page fee policy. And we used to basically talk about how much money the county was not collecting, based on this change. Can we get an update on that now? Because it's totally settled at this point. I'd like to know where we are maybe in 2021 versus maybe where we were, like, say, in 2015, for example. Number of documents filed and how much money was collected. That type of analysis would be good. Okay. I find page this top 10 revenues page very curious because the top 10 revenue items that are listed here, if you add them up, we have a $12.51 million increase in dollar change if you look at that entire column. But overall, our revenues actually have tapered, or at least our ending balance is tapered off, and our spending is actually down a little bit. So to me, it's a little curious how, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around how those three things can be true at the same time. Revenues are up on the top 10. Expenditures are not ARPA, but our expenditures are down a little bit, and our ending balance is tapered off at the same time. How's that? I mean, those first two things would improve our position, and yet our position looks like it's gone down a little bit.
Specifically to the general fund, there was a transfer last year of CARES funds at the end of the year that exceeded the increases that we saw in property tax collections. So so that inflated last year by the amount of that transfer. It was almost $17 million, and tax revenues are up by about 8.
All right. Well, I accept your answer, but you have to take several pages here to kind of see what I just talked about. It's a little, it's a curiosity at least. And then I'd say on the outlook, there's one other thing. I'd say the legislature's in session right now, and there's a lot of discussion about a lot of issues that I think might impact the county. So I think that, legislative issues, and there's a lot of them, I would certainly add that to the list of things to be focused on how that might change our next fiscal year. So with that in mind, well, thank you for your great work. Thank you, Lindsay, for your great work, and appreciate the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions for you, Brent. Thank you for the briefing. We appreciate it very much. I move to receive and file. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner. Aye. Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howe.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item D, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts regular meeting on February 3rd, 2022.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning, Joe.
Commissioners, Joe Thomas, your purchasing director. The regular meeting of the Board of Bids and Contracts on February 3rd results in 2 items, both for Public Works. The first one is the Bridge Project B493, which is a replacement of the bridge located on 199th Street West between Central and 13th Street North. This recommendation is to accept the low bid from Donlinger and Sons Construction Company, and that's in the amount of $1,121,318.18. Our final item is the 2022 Crack Seal Project for Public Works. Recommendation is to accept the bid from Conspec Incorporated, and they are doing business as Kansas Paving, and that's in the amount of $435,669.25. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Joe. I don't see any questions at this time. I move that we approve the recommendations of the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howe.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Mr. Manager.
Chairman and Commission, good morning. Tom Stolz, County Manager's Office. Recommend approval of consent items E through N.
Thank you. Move to approve Echo through November. Any discussion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I don't see any questions. Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howe.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
legislative issues.
Thank you. Tanya?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tanya Cole, Assistant County Manager. This week, we are working with department heads to put together testimony and one-pagers to be ready for subcommittee meetings that I mentioned last week are starting this week and next week for funding, so that they are ready for the recommendations that will go to the Ways and Means Committee and Appropriations Committee. So we are, like I said, working with the department heads to get those ready. Yesterday, we heard that House Bill 2549 was canceled. This is a bill authorizing municipalities to adopt local zoning regulations that establish a minimum distance between group homes in single-family residential zones. So this was a bill that our staff was monitoring, but we did hear yesterday that that was canceled. House Bill 2281, this is the 988 bill, which is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and is on our legislative platform. This will be heard in the House Health Committee next Tuesday, and this is a committee chaired by Representative Landwehr. The committee has agreed to a tax that will be 25 cents per line, and Joan Tammany, our executive director with ComCare, will be providing testimony by Monday, so just wanted to make you aware of that. Let's see, I sent you a note on Senate Bill 388. That's a bill that's relating to mail ballots, requiring the use of the United States Postal Service when returning a mail ballot by mail. As I mentioned, Angela Cadillo had reached out to the legislative chair of the Kansas County Clerks and Election Officials Association, stating that they believe that this bill in its current form wouldn't impact the use of the ballot drop box. I reached out to Jason Watkins on this. There's still some confusion on this, so he is going to work on this and fully get the intent of this bill so we know for sure whether or not that has any effect on our ballot drop box. So once I hear more on that, I will make you aware of that. And then lastly, as we mentioned yesterday, we're working on County Day, which is next Wednesday, February 16th. And so we're working on making arrangements with you to meet some of the legislators while you're there next Wednesday. So I sent out a report, I think, on Monday or Tuesday, and as you're aware, we are monitoring about 96 bills on that tracking list. So that's all I have for you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know Commissioner Howell, Commissioner Meitzner, and I are going to go to County Day next Wednesday. That's why we don't have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. Oh, and I don't see any questions.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks,
all right,
Tanya.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, next item.
Committee reports.
Now, any commissioners have anything to report during committee reports? I don't see anything. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Other.
Any commissioners have anything? Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Rusty, would you mind approaching the podium? I have some questions about the incident reports, and then I wanted to know how long is video footage kept at JIAC?
Morning, Commissioners. Rusty Leeds, Assistant County Manager. The videos overwrite approximately on a 30-day cycle at JIAC, give or take, depending on the volume of movement in the video and stuff like that.
Okay, so the incident that Mr. Barfield mentioned this morning in April of 2021 is gone.
Yes.
So
more than likely, I would need to check. I've asked Steve to go back and try to identify and locate that specific incident that Mr. Barfield referenced in his narrative. And we would have to check and see if there's any reason that they would have copied off and saved any video from that incident. Otherwise, it has probably been written over and doesn't exist.
Okay, so if there is an incident and it's documented and there's footage of it, do you ever save the footage?
That's probably on a case-by-case basis, depending on whether they need it for evidence for some reason.
Okay. So how long will it be before those incident reports, the number of them, obviously excluding any personal or identifiable information, Do you have a timeline as to when you're going to be able to produce that?
So it's my understanding, checking earlier this week, that you had asked for both juvenile intake and assessment incident reports and for JDF. It's my understanding that the JDF incident reports are being processed by corrections staff right now.
Okay.
They will probably have those sorted and in some format that the county counselor can start reviewing by the end of this week. The JIAC incident reports have been sorted, and the county counselor is presently working on reviewing those. So I can't give you a date. I'll have to check with the county counselor's office and see how long the attorney assigned to that anticipates getting through the JIAC reports and then getting into and through the JDF reports.
So, Mike, is that something that you can report back in an email to us as far as when that would be completed by your office?
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have anything during other? Seeing nothing, Mr. Clerk, next item.
Executive session.
Mr. Papoon, we do not have an executive session today, correct? Do any commissioners have anything else that needs to be brought before the bench today? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you all.